y'all. I wanted to share my experience at Auburn University in the architecture program. My goal is to make this a 10-part series with one video for each of the 10 semesters. I thought it would be cool to get a more in-depth and personal look at the life of an architecture student, and I also just thought it'd be cool to create a video diary to look back at how far I've come. The first sort of tradition or rite of passage or whatever is going to J&M and buying your architecture supplies packet, which is a little expensive, but it has pretty much everything you need and probably more. And J&M's just a lovely store and the people there are so helpful. By the way, I'm in foundation unit, not summer unit. The only difference is that summer unit, you do your whole experience the summer after your freshman year, whereas foundation, you do it during your freshman year. So this is all what you would do if you're in foundation. If you're in summer, it would be a lot more intense over like 3 months instead of your whole school year. Foundation unit is obviously establishing the foundations of architecture. So we moved from points to planes to 3D spaces. So here's sort of a point and line exercise that we started with, and then we moved into planes. So we worked on folding different modules, and eventually here we're developing our own modules, as well as looking for modules in real life that we practiced our 3D graphite rendering skills on. So that's a module, you'll see it on pillars around campus. And we took a few of our best modules and developed them further by creating diagrams. Then we experimented with colors to create depth, and then for our final, created a diagram of our module, photographed a model that we had created, and then we had our color here as well as our wall. At the end of a big project, a lot of times I would go to the CVS to get ice cream or go get a kebab or something to hack my brain's reward system to give me dopamine at the end of a project instead of just being super frazzled. In architecture school, the people who are studying with you aren't just classmates, they very much become your friends and cohort, so it's important to connect with them. Studio was closed for COVID, so we'd often go to RBD library to study. Sometimes there would be like a dozen of us all working there trying to figure out a project, and you could be here all day on some days. Like if it's the weekend and you're trying to cram for Monday, you could be there from like 10 in the morning till the deadline. So that kind of sucked. We also went to the business center on the rooftop terrace here. There's seating areas, and it was really nice to watch sunsets and things, especially as it was getting a little bit colder. All our big projects generally had about 2 big parts to them. So at the end of each part, we would go for in-person reviews instead of being on Zoom. And so we would have to print our projects, and then our professors would actually be there in person to review our work and give feedback. And then everyone could also give feedback as well. And there was a lot of benefit to being in person in that way. Just you're able to be more engaged with what people are saying. And it's really helpful to see people's work kind of zoomed in up close. In addition to our just regular architecture studio class, we had 2 other classes. One was Arc 1000 with Mark Bloomberg, which is basically just about different careers related to architecture. So different people in the College of Architecture, Design and Construction would present kind of what their focus was. So be it like construction or environmental design, stuff like that. To help give you an idea, if it's not exactly architecture you want to do, what might be a better fit. And then Viscom, I really love this class. So basically it was art with an architecture focus. So I'll go through some of the work that we did in this class. Basically joined shapes in Rhino and created these interesting sort of shapes. We did our dorm rooms as a layout and then did cross sections of our dorms. Then 3D printed our dorms. I'll get into that in a second. We did chair like variations, which was kind of crazy. I had a lot of fun with that. We did some kind of contour compositional stuff. That was like a map to Dudley. I hated that one. It was so hard to think through. It's too abstract for me, to be honest. That's more contour compositions that you can't really see. Another contour composition working on line work and stuff. More line work and proportional sizes and things. I don't even remember what that was, to be honest. I don't really remember that very well either. We 3D printed a model of our dorm rooms, which was really cool. 3D printing is a really fascinating concept. The downside is it takes forever to print anything interesting, and it's really liable to get messed up. The little printer head can get off track fairly easily. For project 2, we continued with the idea of 2D planes and measured the Dudley complex, so both the main studio building as well as the library and the workshop. And then we arranged those buildings on a site to just think about the spatial arrangement of different buildings. And then we added a 6-foot elevation change and used that kind of landscaping terrain change to complement the buildings, and then we made a model of it. And here was my final for kind of the first part, and I was really proud of it. And then I got a bad grade on it, which is kind of crushing. So I took their advice and tried to explore different options of what I could do. I even took it into SketchUp and really went crazy with the buildings, just pushing the limits of what it could be. And then for my final, I ended up coming with a pretty satisfactory site, although in the end my model ended up being super rushed, so I got another bad grade, but that was just because my work was like pretty incomplete because it was really rushed at the end. And I'll use this situation as an example to say, if you're like me and a lot of times you need external validation in order to feel like you did a good job, then architecture school will be kind of hard for you. So how I reframed it from the advice I got from people is find that creative excitement in your work that will result in you being happy with what you did, no matter what other people said, because you had fun doing it. And then whenever you get bad reviews or anything, be like, okay, I need to change it in order to make my clients, i.e. my professors, happy. But I still had fun doing it along the way. Again, we had our final reviews in person, and it was really awesome to get to see everyone's model. They were really well crafted, and our professor told us so. And it was interesting to just see the different directions that people had done things. And my model was fine, but it was still kind of rough around the edges. I stayed up all night in order to try to like perfect it for in person, even though my digital submission wasn't that good. A great feature of Auburn's architecture program is Rural Studio, which I got to visit one Saturday. I think what makes Rural Studio so appealing, besides just being a fun artsy hippie commune to hang out at as an architecture student, is that it's really good at bridging the divide between architecture theory and architecture practice, and doing so in a way that's actually useful to the community. The Morissette House and Pods are little living facilities for the students, all done in sort of experimental styles. The two on the end were about to be demolished because architecture isn't permanent and doesn't last forever. A lot of times when you work at a nonprofit, it makes you feel more connected to other people and to the world around you instead of just being self-seeking in your interests. And so I think maybe that like pseudo spiritual experience is what people experience when they're at Rural Studio, and that's why it's loved so much. I think Rural Studio just helps you to get in a mindset of helping a community and doing meaningful work as opposed to just doing like really flashy work. It's also just really aesthetically rich, both in the interesting experimental architecture that's going on there and in the very rural, kind of bucolic way of living out in rural Alabama in the middle of nowhere, which I think is especially appealing to people who aren't from rural Alabama, but I am. So it felt kind of like mundane and like I was just at home, but I do definitely see the value. This building used to be a bank and it's been renovated into a public library. This is where students live when they're working on their thesis. They had this interesting amphitheater where I think they have a pig roast or something as a fundraiser or something. And then they had this classroom building. And then we went down this pathway to go to this sort of memorial concrete structure. And inside, I don't know, it's symbolic meaning or something. I didn't really know, but it was interesting. It's probably where they smoke. We also pulled a midsummer or something and went into this forest grove where there's this big tree where I think they also have an event. This site here is where they are actually building things and have built things. So that you saw the green Tyvek on that one house where they're building it, and then that light blue house has been replaced by that brown house right there. So that's where they do some of their work. We had lunch in this park where they've done a lot of projects, including this mint barrel construction thing. Basically somebody had a bunch of mint barrels and was like, can you use these to do something? And so they built this playground. And then they also built this skate park for just the local people. For VisCom, we had a few creative projects. One was drawing our ideal workspace, and another was mapping out our morning and evening routines. We also did more kind of line work based stuff, so like blind face drawing, so you don't look at what your hand is doing while you draw. Some figure ground stuff, some word association cartoons. Also included personal work like this series of paintings I did, as well as this conceptual concrete forest tower. And I did sort of an interior design for an apartment, and I did my room in SketchUp. Piece of advice, I used a planner just sketched out here, like on this piece of paper. And that made a big difference for me staying on top of my work and being able to manage everything I was trying to do. One time I got a little bit off and like missed 3 assignments one weekend because I just like wasn't following a planner because it kind of got pushed to the side. So definitely keep track of your work. Let's talk some about Pumpkin Carve. So this is a really big event for architecture put on by AIAS, which is like this student group for architecture. So basically they set up for it the day before. We take them off of this box truck and set them up on the stairs, and then people carve them here in the courtyard. It was a lot smaller this year because of COVID, I think, but it was fun, and it was nice to be able to chill and like celebrate fall in this way. Also, if you like entered your pumpkin in the little contest they had, then you could like win prizes and stuff. So yeah, great chance to get a hangout with friends and just have a good time. Also, it was like the same day as Halloween weekend, so lots of partying because we are very much in a college town. So there's a lot to do if you're into that. Moving on to project 3, we built on what we had learned by diagramming principles of design like axis, symmetry, so forth, and then photographing them in the real world and creating diagrams. So then we took textiles by the work of Annie Albers, drew them on the computer, and then created a diagram. Then we joined those diagrams on a 3D program and extruded them to create this like really complex 3D mass. Then we had a site visit in downtown Opelika, which is kind of the adjacent city to Auburn, and there was actually a site that was just a grass space in between these buildings, and so we filled in our building in that space, including a gallery, like as a textile gallery, a circulation space, and a ticketing area. These are some diagrams where I was just trying to start thinking through how do I represent my work, something I definitely want to get better at. And then we had cross sections here, just showing what the inside of our gallery would be like. And then we have the long section cut. And my floor plan. So that gives you an idea of what Project 3 is like. My life outside of architecture included living in the Brown Honors dorm in the Quad. So I got to meet people there. I had time to go to the gym. I always try to make time at least 2 or 3 times a week to go do that. Auburn has a freaking amazing gym, like whatever multi-million-dollar facility. And also had homework outside of architecture, so sometimes I'd be like, I finish at midnight and then I need to like finish my other homework for the next day. Got a boyfriend, we'll see at that age as well. Learned that some plans can make you really creative, and so you can see that here. Biden won the presidency, so that was interesting. And then went to an art museum, super cool. Definitely want to continue going to the art museum as they change out their exhibits. If you're an architecture student, you might start taking architecture pictures like this and starting to be aesthetic and going to coffee shops and taking pictures and sketching, or following architecture meme pages like this, or wearing glasses like this, or wearing shoes like this. This is the rolling of the trees by Tumor's Corner that happens every time Auburn wins a football game.